Hello everybody, this is Marco De Angeli, sensor expert from Flex. I'm recording from my lab today to tell you an interesting story about how sensors and emerging technologies can be used to enhance patient therapy and can be integrated into drug delivery devices. So let's have a look. Patient remote monitoring. Just looking at the forecast for this year 2020, we see figures up to 50% growth rate. More than 36 million people will be remote monitored. What are the driving forces behind that? Of course, one is technology and how it's progressing for connectivity with low power, long-range solutions. The other one is sensors and how we can integrate small sensors into wearable devices and small devices all around us in our homes. On the data management perspective, there are new companies offering data exchange formats to improve and complement the picture of ourselves in the cloud. From a financial perspective, incentives are now being based on the therapy outcomes, how the patient is following what has been prescribed to do. An aging population with more chronic diseases will require more control or more optimization of what the patient is doing at home. On the other side, all this data that is collected from the body and goes to the cloud needs to be protected against cyber attacks, needs to be stored from a long period of time, needs to be merged and properly processed. And everything needs to be done from a design perspective and manufacturing perspective, following the most stringent, strict rules and regulations. There are at least three main applications of the data that we collect. One is to create a closed-loop system, like in a CGM, where we are sending glucose levels to an insulin pump real time. Another one is to improve clinical trials outcomes by collecting more information about the patient lifestyle and identify outliers in the study. And finally, very important, is analytics and artificial intelligence applied to the data in the cloud. This is helping us to create a better vision of the patient and provide customized insights specific to each patient. The data to achieve that has to follow specific rules. One is to be very accurate, but not oversampled to avoid a waste of energy. Another thing would be good to have the data with a quality factor so that every time someone is using the data and is merging into a bigger picture, they know how much they can rely on the data that is collected. Needs to be time-bound and time-stamped so that we can synchronize all the data streams that are coming at a different pace at different intervals and align the points in the right space and time. And finally, must be easily formatted and following specific rules so that it can be exchanged by databases properly. There are several sensors nowadays that can be body-worn or integrated in specific devices, collecting more and more medical information about the patients. The important thing to note is that the major part of all the data stream is made by the software processing that is able to extract relevant information and actionable information from all this raw data that is coming. All this data at the end is building up a sort of digital twin of ourselves in the cloud that is a sort of blurred image that the doctor sees when he's accessing the data. Of course, we can improve the resolution of the image by adding additional sensors into the system, but also we need to think about the rest of the devices around us and how they can also feed this data stream properly about sport watches, wristbands, a weight scale with impedance measurement, and so on. So at the end, more data is collected, accurate data is collected, better image in the cloud we can create. If we look at a wearable device as a potential device to enable remote patient monitoring, we can identify at least four major building blocks. One is the sensor itself that is collecting information directly from the patient. And this raw data is then sent to a smart software unit that is filtering out the data from noise and other artifacts, and then is posting the data to a narrowband IoT communication system to transfer the data quickly and reliably onto the cloud. Everything must be also integrated from a manufacturing perspective, combining glass, plastics, electronics, and rubber all together to enhance the usability of the device. When the data is reaching the cloud, it goes into a system with a lot of energy available and huge computational power to run analytics and derive insights and additional medical information. But the challenge indeed is in the local processing, all the actions that are done at device level before leaving the house of a patient. It is incredible how software processing locally has made a big step forward these years. From just a two-electrode system, we can now derive a lot of useful information. Combining this information with a PPG system, for example, we are able to now measure a blood pressure without any cuff on the arm. By looking at the ECG waveform now, we can identify patients or even derive additional medical information about the heart condition. And everything is done locally by just using a wearable device. What you see here is an example of architecture for remote ECG data transfer. There is an analog front end collecting data from the body that is feeding the data to a computational core that is filtering out the noise and the useless information, and then encrypts the data to be ready to be sent to the cloud through a narrowband IoT connection. The data is transported over a security protocol to grant access only to the authorized people, like a doctor. And on the back end, the data can be rendered on a smartphone, on a tablet or a desktop PC. This is an interesting example of integration of a software library into a low-power computational platform as we have in a wearable device. The library is able to compute very interesting medical information, like detecting atrial fibrillation or bradycardia, but also is able to compute physiological stress measurements of a patient, or even identify the patient among a specific group of people. And everything is done with a very low power consumption, granting a long battery life. On a simple device, like a pre-filled syringe, we can add a small electronic module to detect if the syringe has been used and also to transfer relevant information about the drug and the therapy to the smartphone of the user and then to the cloud. When the syringe is new, it is transferring data to the smartphone, showing the name of the drug that is being injected, the expiry date, and providing useful information to the user in terms of how many syringes are left. After the injection, the syringe is able to detect that the drug has been extruded totally, and the next reading to the smartphone will show a successful message and will prompt the user for reminders and additional services. On a complex device, like a personal autoinjectors, there is already electronics and a power system. So there is the opportunity to enhance this kind of devices, adding more functions that are collecting data from the patient. While we are holding the device, for example, we could read out with a PPG sensor some pulse oximetry information. We could even get some ECG data while closing the loop during the injection. We can think about a skin sensor to detect if there is some skin rash around the injection area, or detect the orientation of the device to see if the patient during the months have changed the orientation of the device and changing the spot of injection from a leg to an arm or another part of the body. And finally, there is always the possibility to have additional companion devices, like this one, a lateral flow test strip that is transferring the data automatically to the phone and then to the cloud, and is able to measure specific analytes in blood or other liquids. So in conclusion, the need of reduction of healthcare costs has brought the attention to remote patient monitoring as a technology to collect more and more useful medical data from the patient while they are using their devices at home, and improve the adherence of protocols and the overall outcome of the therapy. Drug delivery devices, as part of these ecosystems, can integrate more and more sensors to collect useful information while the device is being used by the patient. On the other hand, you need to select partners for design and manufacturing that are open and collaborate together to speed up the design and manufacturing phase. And everything must be done under a regulated framework to grant the highest quality of the product being delivered.